First, to help us make sense of this is medical ethicist Kerry Bowman. Professor Bowman is at University of Toronto. You have overseen hundreds of cases of end-of-life medical assistance in dying. You're not opposed to the current legislation, but you're worried about the expansion of the law. Why?
Yeah. You know, I've been very divided on this myself, and it's been a struggle. I've seen, I've worked with people, dying patients, as you said in your intro, hundreds of times. So I've struggled with this, and I am supportive because what has been clear to me is the public categorically has wanted something done about this, and I watched as the medical establishment, the medical community really held off for a long time. And I really felt that we had to support public voices. But as we now look at the point we're at with expanding the legislation, I worry about that expansion.
You actually have called it a circus of inclusion. Okay, we've got mental health now, mature minors, and advanced requests. Tell us about the worry of advanced request.
Well, advanced requests, there are many Canadians out there that were supportive of legislative changes, and what they really thought they were getting was they wanted to say, I don't want to end up muddled and confused in a long-term care facility. I don't want to end up like my mother, my sister, my neighbor.
Or I don't want to end up in pain.
Yeah, or that. But when it comes to advanced directives, a lot of that, people are actually referring to the potential for dementia. So that's one of the things, and pain is included in this.
So if you want an advanced on dementia, you do it now while you're of sane mind. Who pulls out your file and decides now you're demented enough?
That's the problem. Now, let's be clear. Right now, this is not legally possible. So if I were to say the day I can't recognize my children, I would no longer want to be living. And people do say things like that all the time. Okay, so if that was the nature of the advanced directives, I would write that in a state of capacity.
But I'm a child and I still recognize you and I want you alive, but that's, you're going to...
No, I know.
Okay, so is this what this is?
Yeah, that's what that would be about. And then in theory, just imagine, let that play out for a couple of years, and then children come to visit, don't know who you are, don't know who you are. Would we really then expect medical staff to take that person and pass them through medical assistance in dying? Yeah, kill them, yeah. So that is what, that is part of it. With the cancers, I mean, there's a lot of fear that people will lose capacity as their, pain increases and things like that. So that's a lot of the thrust for advanced directives is of that nature. And that's one of the big ones we're looking at. But with the questionnaire that's coming out now, we've got some categories going on. And one of the biggest is advanced directives is a really, really big one. So is mature minors. Depending on what province you're in, but in the province of Ontario, there actually isn't an age of healthcare consent. So a 17-year-old could never under any circumstances have medical assistance in dying, whereas an 18-year-old could. And so what the legislative changes could be is instead of looking at their date of birth, we would actually look at their capacity, as we do with other medical treatments. So that's a big one.
Okay, so we got talking because there has been a survey out until January. Canadians could check it off. We're disappointed that the health minister who's launched that survey, the justice minister, all have refused to comment on the show. Perhaps they're too busy. But this is a massive discussion Canada's having, and are we doing it slow enough, or is the click, click, click on the survey enough?
I find the timelines very tight, and I've also heard that the amount of people trying to enter data on the survey is really significant.
Hey,
it's flooding it. I'm not saying it's crashing, I don't know that, but I know they're getting massive amounts of data, which tells me that people are really, really want to be heard. I find the timeline extremely tight for a democratic process. Because, for the many Canadians that said, my fear with this is that when the legislation goes through, as it did 4 years ago, that we've created this tent of inclusion. But, eventually this small tent will become a circus tent. That's the concern. Because if we now move to, you don't have to particularly be dying of anything specific, because that's one of the biggest elements that's before the court, will soon be before the courts. Age of consent, and then mental health as a primary diagnosis. That's also under consideration. So this is tough, and as I said, I'm very divided on this, but here's my greatest fear is that what this does to society without us even being fully conscious of it, that the day could come where we see a person with whatever challenges they may have, whether they're wheelchair bound or whatever issues they have, and we will look at that person and think, why would they do that to other people, as opposed to supporting them as another human being. And I fear that our very views of human frailty and illness will shift. And I don't think we're fully conscious of that.
And the argument is, but this is just me. I want to choose this for my life. I don't want my fragility to be extended. And as an ethicist, I think what you're challenging me with is you actually ripple out to all of society, because then people start thinking, they're not worth it, they're not worth it.
Yeah. And that is what happens. But I still go back to my original point that watching patients over many, many decades and hearing so many voices about how Canadians really felt they wanted to be in control at the end of life, that is where I was supportive you know, for the inclusion of this legislation. The broadening of it, so the question before the courts is, what kind of safeguards are we going to have? So, you know, are we going to have mandatory psychiatric assessments? Are we going to have, what are we going to have? And we may have none of those things. We don't know.
Okay, so at the very least, talk to your member of parliament.
Good idea. Very good idea. Because this is happening very quickly.
Yeah, let's have, as Canadians, we should slow it down and make sure this is a very thorough ethical search. Okay, Kerry Bowman, a bioethicist from the University of Toronto, clinical ethicist in hospitals helping on the issues of dying. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Lorna. Thank you.
Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. What do you think about today's topic? Let us know in the comments.